Also a closing talk of today, and I'm giving a floor back to Jens Hauser, who will be moderating this session. Microphones unmute. Jens Hauser, Marko, please unmute.
Yeah. So, hi, Marko, I can see you. Can you? So, yeah, I have the honor to actually introduce Marko PELJHAN here. He's also a partner of our Green European Research and Art project. And just to introduce him shortly, as a kind of conceptual artist, activist at the threshold of art and the technoscience between artificial intelligence and ecological data mining, Marko PELJHAN has founded the arts and technology organization Project Atoll in the early 90s. And he also co-founded one of the first media labs in Eastern Europe, Ludmila, in 1995. He has then worked a lot with a structure called MacroLab, a project that focused on telecommunications, migrations, and weather system research in an intersection of art and science. Then Marko was also flight director of parabolic flights for artists to work in alternating gravity conditions. And he's also the recipient of many awards, art awards, such as the 2001 Golden Nycard Ars Electronica, together with Carsten Nicolai for their work Polar, the UNESCO Digital Media Prize for MacroLab in 2004, and so on. And Marko is currently the chair of Media Arts and Technology, the graduate program at UC Santa Barbara in the United States, and also holds an appointment within the Department of the Art. So I think we will get a kind of very large and broad overview of topic-related activities from your side. So your talk will be discussing the landscape of systemic strategies that have been or are currently being developed in this framework of art, technical media, engineering and science initiatives, from the MacroLab to Arctic Perspective and ISO Labs. So we are really looking forward to give this overview, and the floor is yours. Thanks, Marko.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jens. How do you hear me? Is that okay?
I can hear you well.
Okay, perfect. Because I'm in a very particular situation. As you can see, I'm on a boat currently.
Yeah, it looks like a spaceship. I was just wondering how much gravity do you actually experience?
Yeah, gravity 1 here.
Where are you physically now?
I'm currently actually in the south of Croatia, south of Istria, not Croatia, in Pula, on a boat. Among other things, I like to escape from time to time, and this is a very particular time because it's family birthdays, and so it happened that we decided to go on the boat. But it's not a coincidence, of course, that I also work on boats because, as you will see also from the work, it's a kind of part of it, and so it happened. But first of all, thank you very much for this invitation. It's really an honor. I actually feel a little bit humbled after all that I have seen and read, and also looked at the recordings from the previous days. And I must first say that, as always, as everything that comes from the Rixi planet, this has been an amazing conference, again, quite groundbreaking in many ways, bringing together really, really fantastic people. So I hope really that my talk won't be, it's difficult to sum up. First, I've of course thought that maybe one of the ways to approach this would be to kind of gather all together, since I'm the last keynote. But on the other hand, since I also have a problem that some of us do, that my archives are not very, very well organized, I decided that maybe to do a presentation about the work also makes a lot of sense, because it can lead to a good discussion afterwards. And as you have said, Jens, the title of my talk was basically Sensing Remotely, a systemic arsenal, right? Systemics arsenal. And I will start really with the notion of systemics, and then I will go on also to some of my slides, and we have also some videos if there will be time and so on. So the word systemics, really, I discovered it quite late in my research journey, let's say, and creative journey, and is a term that is coined by second-order cybernetists that some of you might be quite familiar with, or maybe not. And if not, I strongly recommend his work to be studied, which is Heinz von Förster. He was also a dean of one of the deans of cybernetics during the Macy's conferences in the States in the 50s, and really an influential thinker and writer, one of the proposers of the term of constructivism, which really it deals with, of course, the reality as perception phenomenon, right? We are constructing the reality we are describing constantly. And I think that that's very, very important, especially when we talk about more objective implements and instruments and observatories and methodologies that we are trying to build. And especially at this intersection where art intersects engineering and science, there's, of course, first of all, a lot of, let's call it epistemological confusion, which I think comes really from the difficulty of kind of really integrating stuff. And that's where the term systemics comes from, as coined by von Förster. And he explains it in a very short interview quite nicely, where he basically looks at the etymology of the word scientia in science in Latin, with the root sky, to divide, to basically take things apart. And it's the same term that is then also can be understood in schizophrenia, schism, and so on. So science always tries to divide to understand, right? So to come to very basic elements to understand. Not all science, of course, but I'm here painting a very broad picture, of course. And as this conference also has shown, we are always then really concerned also, where does the art come from? What is the role of art in all of this? And von Förster proposed the term systemics, not as a substitute for science, not as a substitute for art, but as a new kind of approach, which is integrating, an integral approach. And he explains it very plastically. I mean, the man was very humorous. He explains it very plastically, also in his texts, but also in the interviews that our actually German artist colleague Lutz Dambeck did with him when he was creating the film Das Netz. So von Förster is featured in that movie too. And he basically explains that really when we talk about edges of science, and I will show you one example later that I think kind of tells it's very meaningful, in my opinion, on one level. We are dealing already with poetry, with absolutely, he actually calls it, and he talks about the origin of the universe as we know it, of course, and that this is really more than theories, is a duel or a triple fight or a quadruple fight of different poets, right? And it's all about who has the best story about this origin. And yes, it can be constructed through very epistemological basis on facts that are derived from observations. But as we know, even the term observation, when we deal with quantum states, becomes a very, very kind of shaky term. So let's leave that aside, because we've been talking a lot today. We also heard the word, and there was actually a question, and I had the same question. So I was happy that Rasa asked it. So what was really meant by superintelligence and so on? And of course, I love the term. And I think that, if I were to answer that, I would say superintelligence is this complexity that we are all just a little part of, right? That's where, it's a joint intelligence, an integral intelligence. It's a systemic intelligence. So in my work, I have come to that a little bit, slower and really maybe sometimes just brushing at the things. Let me now share here my screen and see what, if I can manage to do that. There we go. So that's what I'm sharing. Thank you. And I'll go here. Beginning. There we go. You can see my screen, right? It works. Okay, good. Really, my story really begins with these images. This is actually a MODIS instrument composite of our planet, kind of invisible light. You've seen a lot of these, of course. They have been historically very important. But personally, my connection goes back into the exploration of the electromagnetic spectrum. And Jens, actually, you wrote very nicely that there is this confusion about the spectral signature of the color green and how it has so little to do, in a way, with the processes behind it, right? And I find that a beautiful observation, because it kind of shows this dissonance in a way, and many times are kind of dealing with on so many levels. And this is one of them, right? We just call it green, and that's it. And of course, with all of the consequences that were discussed very deeply, also through this conference, and also through the work that you all have done in the past few years around actually kind of recontextualizing the idea of green, and also through the critique of green as it is used for political and, of course, more business purposes, let's say. But the spectrum has been really, really important for me. And I had this very intimate connection to it from very early age. In former socialist countries, we used to have, at least in Slovenia, we did in Yugoslavia, but that's probably the case also for other countries. We used to have what is called and was deemed technical culture. And technical culture was actually something that was, culture. It was part of culture, but it was technical culture. And the idea of technical culture was, of course, that everybody should be proficient and educated in technical culture, besides also, in culture, in art and technical culture. And part of technical culture was also the culture of radio. And I had a fortunate situation that in my hometown, there was a radio club, which was very, very active, a ham radio club, amateur radio club. And one of the people who is now my colleague, professor, that was very active in this radio club, was this design. Europe launched its first meteorological satellite, Meteosat, in the mid-70s. And even though Meteosat was, it had coded images, of course, it was still a very state kind of controlled image taking of our planet. And for, of course, purposes of meteorology. And we could not really, get access to these images. Well, my colleague, Matjaž Vidmar, Dr. Vidmar, designed and produced a small hacked satellite receiver to receive these images. And there was a few of us who built these receivers according to his plans in the early 80s. As kids, and I had my black and white TV at home, and every morning I would download from the Meteosat satellite, which was flying 36,000 kilometers above the equator, my image of the Earth. Yeah, and so it happens. So this is my dish, not the first one. This is dish number 4, and much younger me, of course, and thinner. And but a very, very important part of kind of my perception of the world, that it's possible to do these kind of things, and really we created tools to access data and kind of find out information very early on. This was part of the ethos that I had, also for the culture of radio, but also in general, that was kind of my approach. And, after, of course, a lot of permutations, which I'm not going to go into today, which were both conceptual in nature, philosophical, let's call them, I created this project, which some of you might know, which is MacroLab. And MacroLab was really designed as kind of a mobile observatory that would travel around the world and receive, basically be totally connected to the electromagnetic spectrum, create a kind of what I defined at that time, insulation, isolation situation within it, where artists, engineers, and scientists could work together for longer periods of time in a kind of an enclosed environment, but totally connected through all kinds of interfaces and devices. And the first MacroLab was conceptualized in 94 and was first built in 97 through a bizarre, actually looking back, coincidence with an invitation to be part of Documenta in Kassel. And that's kind of what launched the project, and a bank loan. And so I build it together with a lot of people. Of course, this kind of projects, as a lot of the initiatives that we are dealing with are not, the work of a singular person. I was just the fire starter. And then, we created teams around these projects and so on. And as you mentioned, part of it was starting institutions like Projekt Atoll, or starting institutions like today, Ludmila. And all of these things were very much part of, the way I saw the world happening. But the most important thing was this building of instruments, because I always thought that autonomy that is derived through technological means is very important part of empowerment of free subjects, right, in society. The technological tools really enable us to kind of create leaps on many levels. And that was what MacroLab tried to do with its many appearances in different, very isolated places around the world until 2006. And then we had the grandiose idea to bring this project to Antarctica, which I will talk a little bit later. But which didn't happen in its first conceptual mode. This is the interior of the MacroLab. This is what we call MacroLab console. This is raw computing power there, which was mostly used for decoding in then encrypted communications from certain satellites, and mostly decoding also non-encrypted, but just coded stuff. And we used, we had all kinds of, radio equipment in the lab, both for our own communications and both for what we called spectrum mapping purposes. And part of this was, of course, also working with remote sensing, looking at satellites. And one of the first, this autonomous satellite-related project that happened at the lab resulted then in this image being kind of taken with the satellite. This is an image of the lab. You can see it on this island of Campalto, and it's the little silver speck on the bottom of the island. That's MacroLab from space, from 500 kilometers up in space, as it was creating its own self-portrait. Yeah. So we instigated this photo and then managed to download it from an Earth observation satellite that shall remain unnamed, because it's still something that we did without any permissions. And so remote sensing, of course, for the, this was more of a conceptual approach. But then, of course, as part of the project, we also worked really with scientists dealing with environmental data. As part of the project that you see here, this was on the same island, Campalto and Venice Lagoon. We actually designed and implemented projects for creating, potable water out of the super polluted lagoon water from sea, and we had our own waste management and recycling system and our own power, wind power, solar power, and so on. It was a very, for its time, it was a very advanced machine, Macro Lab, to live in. And of course, a lot of people took part in the project, more than 300 artists, engineers, and scientists throughout its years. And a lot of projects were kind of embryonically conceptualized there and had a life of its own, from software to also hardware. And I don't even want to talk about media. A lot of media was produced. So as I said, conceptually, the project was supposed to end in Antarctica in 2007, 2008. We started this as part of the International Polar Year. International Polar Year was previously a geophysical year in 1957, which resulted in the creation of the Antarctic Treaty. And my goal at the time, and the goal of the organization, that we actually had a lot to do with our gatherings in Riga. It was called ITASC, Interpolar Transnational Art Science Constellation. And ITASC's goal was to build a permanent station in Antarctica for artists and scientists, not do just an exhibition or exhibition of Antarctica or something like that. And that's why I think because of that ambition, of course, the project still is not realized. What we managed to do was bring one module down to Antarctica at the time. Actually, not one. This is the first one. There were more. This is the international standard payload rack that was installed and drawn in Modland with our sensors and communication systems. That's our dear friend who many of you know, especially in Riga, Adam Hyde, one of the Radio Coelia, of course, founders, together with Honor. And he was down in the first ITASC mission, installing actually the first FM radio station in Antarctica. That was also kind of community driven. Because believe it or not, nobody had this idea before to create a radio in Antarctica. I don't know why, a radio station, but of course, we did it as part of ITASC. This is part of the same project. Of course, everything in Antarctica is kind of state-based one way or the other, even though this is a transnational territory. So we had to give a nod to all of the countries that were present in our mission. And as you can see, we have the United Nations flag, we have Brazil, we have, of course, New Zealand, Slovenia, Swaziland, South Africa, and Benin, I think, right? Or Lesotho. I'm sorry about that. I don't know which one is the lowest one. This is Umtombo Umlilo. That's the kind of the prototype, the really first prototype of the station. This was realized then in subsequent two missions, together with this volume. This was mostly created then by my colleague Thomas Mulcair in the second phase of the project, when we realized that we are not going to be able to basically build our big station. As part of all of this project, we developed, for example, sensor technology, unmanned aircraft systems, or as they are called wrongly, in my opinion, drones. This was many years before drones became a normal occurrence in our skies. And actually, it started really as a project that was connected to Macro Lab in Australia, where the idea and the first conceptualization of our first unmanned system happened because we were working with the whale migration scientists, and which were doing this from the coast. And then, I said, why don't we build a robotic airplane? This was in '99. We could actually do this. And 4 years later, actually, we flew the first prototype. So that's Vladimir Antarctic Base as it was imagined, not yet realized. Yeah, but it's still something that it's in the works. As you know, Antarctica has become quite popular for artists in the past few years. So maybe this project, has a different meaning nowadays. But I'm very, very happy that we brought it to this level. The problem was of course funding, and the problem was that we were competing with a lot of different initiatives that were, let's call them, much cheaper, coming from kind of the art space. So in the end, that didn't happen. But since the initiative was interpolar, we decided also to go, of course, to the Arctic, and that was actually in the beginning, really. Our goal was to be present on both poles as centers of the planet. Arctic, of course, it's a very, very different place than Antarctica, geopolitically extremely different. And of course also resources-wise different, and there's no Arctic treaty. There's Antarctic treaties. Arctic is basically a zone of conflict and a little bit of cooperation. So a very different place. And in the Arctic, of course, for difference of Antarctica, you have not only scientists living there and researchers and state actors, but also, of course, military and resource extraction industries, as well as indigenous people, which is the most important thing, and that have been there for quite a few thousand years and living on the land. That is, of course, extremely changing. I'm not going to go into the explanations of what is happening in the Arctic. Let's just say that it's affecting us all as we kind of knew it would. But the Arctic is really a place where a lot of people live, and it's also a place under constant kind of colonial stress from all sides, right? Both in the North American continent, as well as Europe, as well as, of course, in Russia. And this is the most southernmost flag of an Arctic-related peoples, the Ainu in Hokkaido. And these flags are just part of, we had them as part of a project. I just want to showcase them, to give a nod to all of the people that are living there. Most of our works happened here in Nunavut, working with these people. This is Eof Paniak, aka the computer. That's how everybody in his community calls him, because Paniak, of course, is extremely precise in determining distances and calculating things. He's one of the elders that we worked with. This is one of the camps in the Arctic, on the island of Manituk, where we have spent quite some time. And we installed, of course, internet, why not? There, also hacked through hack dish, and we were stuck for quite a long time in this kind of, quite pleasant conditions, working again in remote sensing projects, gathering a lot of data, sharing this data with the communities, and we built a specific project that actually dealt with the communities, which is called Sinuni. And Sinuni is an initiative. It's a land, sea, and air recording device, Silamilu Nunamilu Nipiriuti in Inuktitut. And basically, it's a community-operated sensor network, quite advanced for at the time when we designed it. At the time, of course, the computing capability of cheap mobile phones and processors that are now available on mobile phones was not yet there, and all the mobile phones were not working properly in the Arctic. They would freeze, even though if you used kind of advanced functions to kind of decouple them from the network. There's no mobile phone networks there too. And so we built a small infrastructure around it, basically based on open hardware, software, and community development. And this is some schematics from the time. This is the first prototype of the unit. This was the second prototype of the unit, and which was a small portable data gathering weather station, but also you could record, of course, animals and create maps with it. And I'll show you some of the maps that we created. This is the way Sinuni operates. Basically, there's a data collection phase, which is mapping. It has a database, multimedia content. It's reviewed by the community. So really, the whole idea is that not all data that is gathered in this kind of way is actually shared with everybody, but it's it's reviewed and then it gets distributed afterwards. And by the elders, hunter and trappers organizations, and then part of it goes to the community, part of it is public, right? And results in research collaborations and so on. So we kind of plugged it in a lot of already existing networks. There's a lot happening in the Arctic, both from the remote sensing level and also on the ground, right, for years. So it's not like we created something completely new, but again, we created tools that empowered a specific strata of population that was not able to use this kind of tools and not be able to participate in this scientific discourse before. And that was very, very important as part of the project. Part of it is also the decolonization of colonial names and the creation of maps with unmanned systems again. We did a lot of work there in the late aughts with our drones that we designed and mapped with them. So this is just some of the stuff. That's one of the maps that we created through the project. You can see the kind of traditional place names replacing the actual colonial mapping names. And there's been a lot of this work, and it has a life of its own, which is really kind of beautiful. Part of the initiatives that were connected to all of this remote sensing is also the creation of this, what I called common data processing and display units, CDPDU. And these are basically small portable workstations for the collection and processing of remote sensing data that can be operated in harsh environments. And we have also used them, of course, also to display this data then in kind of more, let's say, display contexts, such as exhibitions and so on. The next project that we are working on is this mobile Kamutik media kind of facility that's going to come online in the next 2 years. And it's part of my new initiative, which is called ISOLabs. One of the things that I wanted to also share with the community here is the Inuit Kayumayatukanget. Now, this is, roughly translated as Inuit knowledge or the knowledge. But the idea is really, this is actually written in the basis of the constitution in Nunavut. And I think that it could be literally not appropriated, but taken, used for everything we do, for creation really of a completely new society. And they were able to kind of define these things through a lot of experience throughout the years. And as you can see, we have connection values and, sharing, generosity, family, respect, love, listening, equality, significance, and trust, work values, volunteering, observing, practicing, mastery of certain things, teamwork, cooperation, unity, consensus, and conservation, coping values, patience, endurance, improvisation, strength, adaptability, resilience, resourcefulness, moving forward, take the long view, survival, interconnectedness, and honesty. These are the concepts Pidgisiranic concept of serving, and so on. My Inuktitut pronunciation is not so good, and I don't want to gobble them. But these are the main important concepts: concepts of serving, decision making, skills and knowledge acquisition, concept of being resourceful to solve problems, concepts of collaborative relationship or working together for a common purpose, and concept, very important, of environmental stewardship. And as part of this, so there's kind of political strain to the work in the Arctic. As part of this, we also then, together with our community friends, created what is called the Phoenix Declaration. And the Phoenix Declaration was created in as part of the Arctic Perspective Initiative exhibition, actually, which we had a conference at HMKV here in Dortmund. Here's some photos of that event, an open space conference. And this is the community radio station. Again, radio has a very outsized role in the Arctic, a very important role. And this is by far the best community radio I've seen in my life. You basically can just come in there, switch it on with that little switch there. That's switch from CBC, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, to local. You can just switch it on, and then the local community will, of course, listen to your program. That's exactly what we did several times. And Isuma TV, if you don't know it, go on it, isuma.tv. It's an indigenous network for indigenous media production, created by our collaborators and friends from Iglulik Isuma Productions, and the director here, which you can see up in the upper right corner, Zacharias Kunuk. We also work with schools there, building the mobile kamutiks and labs. This is a media authoring workshop for Linux tools for media production. And we also created hydroponic Arctic gardens, that in containerized form, that have a life of its own now in the Arctic. This is the exhibition. I'm going to go very quickly because, of course, I'm running out of time. But I'm going to come here, which is, of course, throughout all of these projects, we also started thinking about having our own satellite in space. This was the first concept of that satellite. It actually happened through this interpolar transnational art science constellation. And that project then resulted in actual building of a satellite, which is called the NEMO HD, and was just launched. And I have a short film that we will stream later, so you can see what happened. This is the conceptual. It's basically an Earth observation satellite. But the most important thing here is, of course, that it's a tool that we are, now it's being commissioned and so on. But in the next 3 years, you will see a lot of calls through our networks, also through Rixi and everybody here, and to basically use the data from the satellite, not only use the data, but also create experiments for the satellite. What is really unique about this project is that it is a satellite that is basically can be interactively guided. So it has also a video, a feature on it, and you can create your own videos. As part of that, we had to build the ground control stations. Again, this is one of them in Slovenia that was built as part of the project. And, again, this was not only my initiative. It was mostly, 3 people that started this. I wanted to do a purely artistic satellite. It turned out to be that that's not going to happen. But we created a nice integrated satellite project. Collaborated also with the University of Toronto in the end, their spaceflight laboratory. It took us 10 years from conception to launch, really. The first call for the satellite we did in 2010. I was in the Arctic when we actually created the call for collaboration on this satellite project. and 10 years, and it's launched. And that's short for space, I hear. For us, of course, it seems very, very long. So this project really had a cultural component and a heritage coming from culture, from the art scene from the beginning. But in a lot of the official documentation and so on, this was not allowed to be mentioned, as you can imagine. And or you can't, but I can tell you how this is when you start working with people like European Space Agency and so on. They are still very, very afraid and don't understand when you mention, arts-related research connected to space and so on. It's a very complicated story, but I can talk about that in the question and answer session for sure. It's part of the systemic strategies. Let me just put it so. So on September 3rd, we managed to do it. I was in French Guiana to see this thing off. We were all very, very tired, but it happened. The satellite was released over the island of Jeju in South Korea after being launched from Guyana, 40 minutes. This is some glimpses from the clean room. That's the team, part of the team. A lot of people worked on this, of course, on what I call, a dishwasher size satellite. That's NEMO. And here we are taking it to be encapsulated in the rocket itself. And here is the capsule being put on the Vega launcher in Kourou. And we can now play the Ariane space video that I have sent to our dear friends in Riga. We can wait. Yeah, it was launched with a VV16 mission. Yeah, so will I see it on my screen here? Because I'm not on YouTube.
Yeah, you will see.
Is it playing, Rasa?
No.
Yes, it does.
Where?
Ah, okay. All right.
Where? You should stop sharing screen, right? Yeah, you
Let
should
me know
stop
when it's
sharing the
over.
screen. Marko, stop sharing the screen. Marko, you should stop sharing your screen, then you will see.
You know, I didn't hear you.
You should stop sharing your screen. Kurskania?
There's no sound here. There should be some sound, but that is just fancy music. Or not so fancy for our taste.
No, skaņas.
I think I gave Peters the instruction not to have sound, but I didn't mean here. Here you see Nemo in space on the left-hand side.
You can
and
comment.
That's us. That's me with the flag. This one was supposed to be without sound, but that's okay. We don't need to watch this anymore. I will go back to my screen sharing. Just a second. Let me see if I can do this again. Share and current slide. Okay, we are again in my screen share, right? Yes. So we are in orbit, and actually I'm very glad I can share the first picture from our satellite. I saw this beautiful cloud project yesterday, and these are the clouds over Slovenia from September 23rd. This is the first image. Of course, we are still, commissioning it, which means really It's a long technical process and a very interesting one, though. How to wake up multiple computers and make them work together for the common purpose. So again, a very systemic approach, but we will soon be then seeing also some more valuable images than this one. This was just literally the first image that we took to see if it even works. It didn't matter what is it looking at, right? And that day it was very cloudy. But this is another image that really changed, a lot of things dealing with, ecological movements in the world. Yeah, that's of course the famous Apollo 8 Earthrise image that books were written about, of course, and it was the beautiful thing about Earthrise. If you didn't know, it was not a planned situation, right, at all. Earthrise was taken as an image by coincidence, by chance. They didn't know what to expect. And it was there's a beautiful, actually, reconstruction of how this happened. You can see it on YouTube. If you check Earthrise, Apollo 8, it might come up just for the space buffs out there. Rasa, how much time do I still have? I don't want to take too much time because we can still have some questions.
Yeah, I think then you don't have. I think then you don't have time anymore if you want some questions, I'm afraid.
Yeah. So I will basically slowly stop here, even though I still wanted to talk about another project which is connected, but I can kind of leave it for the future, which is Somnium, which is a project which is really connected to something that was also discussed these days. It was called superintelligence, but also just the idea of course, exoplanets and the idea of having a potential for life in our galaxy, right? And Somnium was built as an observatory to teach us about these questions. This is the famous Drake equation, which of course has very widely varying results about the possibility of life in our own galaxy, from zero life to in the known universe to 156 million life-supporting planets in Milky Way alone, right? So this is a big differential here, 0 versus 156 million. And you can calculate that, and we did. But basically, we have reached so little even with our electromagnetic signals, right? We have reached approximately 100 to 150 light years around our solar system, since we are emitting some kind of electromagnetic radiation that is man-made. And we would have reached from 15,000 to 46,000 star systems, 46,000 star systems. So the signals are not transmitted from all directions, right? So it's probably much smaller number, and probably in this local group of galaxies. And it's a very, very confusing situation. And because the answers to confusing situations cannot always be given by science, we need, of course, philosophers and artists to give us the answers. And that's kind of where I can conclude with this, because in a way, this is the struggle of integration. This is the concept of systemics is integrally connected to this idea that some answers need also a much more complex positioning and disposition than what just science can offer us. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you a lot, Marko. I think we probably have, Rasa, a little bit time for questions. Is it correct?
Yeah, we can have some 10 minutes.
Maybe I can start with one, Marco. I mean, of course, obviously, the whole issue of going beyond artist, genius, individual creativity is very, very, very present in all what you do in these kind of transdisciplinary constellations. I wonder still how it comes that specifically in the small country that is Slovenia, right, that we encounter a whole bunch of attempts to actually not only create and starting institutions, but building instruments. Is this a kind of Nordung heritage? Is it because there's such a condensation, or is it also because of nationalism, because of Nordung? I mean, what makes such a small territory explode in ways that collective systemics are being envisioned as something that unfolds as technology and institutions?
Yeah, thank you for this. I think really, nationalism, no. Although there is, of course, a strain of that for sure, because there is this kind of always looking also back historically, right? As a small nation needing historical answers for current dispositions and positioning. That's for sure happening. And that's also a problem. It's quite serious, because as soon as you have that, you kind of clash with absolutely ideas that have nothing to do with the idea of a modern nation state, let's say, right? So let's leave that aside. My answer to this would be that it's kind of twofold. One is that it's connected to the fact that Slovenia, being so small, is also at an incredible cultural crossroads between East and West and North and South. And I don't mean that just, geographically, but also politically. It's just a phenomenon in itself, right? The fact that, I, for example, grew up on the western side of Slovenia, on the Italian border, and literally, for me, not for everybody, of course, maybe because of nationalistic and historical reasons, but I consider Italian culture being, part of my culture. Mm-hmm. And it's really important for me, both because of the language, but in general, it's so enriching. And the same goes, of course, with Germanic kind of notions. The same goes with the very, very strong kind of Slavic connection that goes to the East, to the Orthodox world, with our friends from, Neue Slowenische Kunst. We many times joke that Ljubljana is the last metro station of Moscow. Somewhere in the outskirts, in Podmoskovje, is this weird city, because there are these strange connections. They exist. They are both spiritual, cultural, and so on. And I think that it's maybe also just a matter of survival. That's one part, I would say, which is kind of geopolitical, geographical, geocultural. The other one is for sure the very, very strong notion of what I called before and defined technical culture. And I don't know if that is still existing in such an extent as it used to, but it's definitely the fluency of at least my generation on both, philosophical and engineering side and scientific math and so on was very strong. And it was always stressed that these things have to coexist, right? Culture was very important. And I think that's part of it, but you could unpack this in so many different ways, I would say. But definitely, the fact that one of the first space pioneers was born in Slovenia, actually, no, he was born here in Pula, where I am today. Sorry. Even more interesting, right? So Nordung was born in Pula, where I am currently staying, because his father was in the Austro-Hungarian army. Pula was the big Austro-Hungarian port. And Pula was also, interestingly, an extremely important place for technical culture, because here is where the first Austro-Hungarian submarines were built. And here is where the first Austro-Hungarian Antarctic expedition was designed and put together to go to Antarctica, where I'm now staying. So, this is an interesting place on that level. But I think that these microecologies, once you start looking at them, exist everywhere. The interesting part about Slovenia is that it was never a colonial power. So, it has this strange undercurrent in itself. And I think that's very similar also to, of course, the Baltic states, which were also never really a colonial power. Well, except, colonial. Lithuania has its Poland, Lithuania, kingdom, and so on. It was a force in itself, of course. But you couldn't call that a colonial projection, really. I don't know if I answered, but there is something brewing. Yeah, and the fact, that when ours was one of the first media labs in Eastern Europe, right? Together, really, with what happened where you are right now, actually, where Rasa is in Rixi, right? We were, I think, one of the, Budapest and Riga were probably the first three places in Eastern Europe.
Marko, I can see two questions popping up in the Zoom group chat. One is from Raitis and Eva. They seem to overlap a little bit in the sense that they would like to know what is the data that is collected by the satellite, and is there any open data from the satellite?
Yeah. So the satellite actually has three kinds of sensors on board. It has what is called a panchromatic sensor with a ground sampling distance of 2 meters, which means 2 meters per pixel. And that's a kind of visible light sensor, really Earth imaging. Then it has a multispectral sensor, with which in a kind of classical multispectral Landsat formats, so bandwidths, which is mostly used for, it can be used and will be used for determining mostly growth, vegetation, and so on. And then it has also this video mode, so live video from space. And I can actually, if you don't need to see my face, but I had a beautiful video for everybody, which maybe we can run while we are asking these questions. It's called, the file is called Orbit. And, but in terms of open data, the satellite will be, yes, so we are building all kinds of infrastructures around this, also collaborating with one of the American, Silicon Valley ventures, which is called Planet, and all of our data will be open, completely open source. And as I said, there will be calls for projects to use this satellite for all kinds of purposes, hopefully by really interesting and adventurous artists. That
can you share the link by chat?
Yeah, I mean there is not there yet, but you can look at the owner of the satellite, the institution that officially launched it, is called Space SI. I'll put it in the link. There we go. But the actual projects will be probably not run through Space SI, but they will be run through Projektatol. So, yeah.
Are there other questions in the group that you, beside using the chat function, you would like to ask? Then you may open your mic.
Involved in biotechnology and showed an image with bacteria. Bacteria. Yeah, that was not bacteria, actually. That was a lichen. That was a lichen in Antarctica. But, which is a symbiosis, right, of bacteria and algae, if I'm not mistaken. So on the bio level, as you all know, we also have a very, very strong heritage of our mostly amazing female artists and researchers in Slovenia, very active in the bioart scene. But we are definitely, as part of also Macrolab and so on, there have been a lot of projects which today could be called bioart. But at the time, we didn't just use that term. that were created within the project. Yeah. All right. Any more questions?
Well, if there is an end, any, I will give back the role, the control to Raza. Raza, are you ready to pick up?
Yes. Thank you, Marko, and thank you, Jens, for moderating. And yeah, all these last panels, we didn't have any breaks because we can take them when we can. Just switching off our images. So that's why also the schedule was quite intense. But we wanted to put everybody in just one, not in parallel panels. So that's why these days were rather long, but very excited. So, well, we are close to the end. We are in the end. And the only program in 2 hours we will be showing a recording from a live concert which took place 2 weeks ago in our Rixi Fields residency in a greenhouse, which we just renovated during the COVID time because there was a lot of time to spend in countryside. And we made a wonderful concert live stream for Ars Electronica this year. And so this will be a recording, and also some of my student work, also a beautiful program of immersive biosensing artworks, plant form projects will be shown tonight from 8 p.m. Riga time. Okay, so that's about it. And those who are from Riga, based in Riga, welcome to see all the exhibitions. So the exhibition in the library is open until 17th of November. And also the exhibition in Rixi Gallery open till 12th of December. Okay, so, and yeah, thank you. Thank you again, and we continue with Green Project, and thanks again my partners and collaborators and colleagues in Switzerland for this amazing 3-year project, Eco Data, Eco Media, Eco Aesthetics, which actually was very strongly conceptually building up all this event here. So contributing also to the Green Project, trying to think about emerging nature cultures. And thanks, Marko, to bringing us back to the universe, because we were shifting between those two, terrestrial ecosystems and atmosphere. Yes, also last day before previous keynote also was in the atmosphere, and about everything which melts goes there. Yeah. So, and also my this artwork is about this atmospheric forest. So for us, these connections, we can go very far as artists. Yeah, almost as far as Marko showed us today. And then we are happy to come back and see the perspective from up back there. Yeah. So because we are still here, and we love to think about terrestrial coexistence. Yeah. Okay, so here is the team. Can I can show from my other. So here was the team. So it's getting dark already. It's raining again. In the morning was sun shining, and so here is our technical crew and Brightis and moderator, Solvita and Agnes, festival producer. So yeah, we are really happy that you all stayed for us so long, all these 3 days. Varat mutēt viņus visus. Okay, we are unmuting you all because we would love to say applause. We never heard you during these 3 days.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye. Okay, bye.